Hello there.
Today we're painting up some Krootox Rampagers. So this is my test mini here. This is the miniature I used to suss out what my color scheme was going to be, and I'm very pleased with how this turned out. But obviously I didn't record this, so we're going to take this other mini here, and we're going to go through the layers of skin on this guy before returning to the previous miniature for the leather and whatnot. So this is just using the Warpaint Fanatics brush on primer to prime this mini. With that done, we're going to give the entire skin area a green base coat. I'm using Greenskin from the Fanatic lineup. You're going to want to get that basically across the chest, both arms, both legs, and the head area, as well as the hands and feet. So here it is after 2 full coats. Well, the second coat is still kind of drying here. We're going to let this finish up and dry before going on to the next step. Just make sure you've got all the skin covered, because the next step is to take all of the skin and cover it with Athonian Camo Shade from Citadel Color. This is a good green wash to help give us some dark recesses and shift the tone of the paint to be a little bit more dark. With that done, we let it dry, and this is what you're left with. It's quite dark and quite glossy. Don't worry, the next few layering steps will resolve quite a bit of that, as well as the varnish at the end there. The first paint we're going to use for the layering is Straken Green from Citadel Color, and we're going to do this on, I'd say, about 80% of the skin area. We're going to want to leave the recesses in areas that we want shaded relatively free from this light pigment, but 80 to 90% coverage depending on how dark you want the miniature to be. Make sure to thin your paints. It's going to take probably a coat or two to get a happy coverage, but that's the point of layering. We don't want to overdo it. With the the Straken Green done, we're going to do Death Guard Green. Now this covers about 60% to 70% of the full area, or about 80% of the previous layer we just covered. So get it in the high areas you want to be lighter than the recesses, and continue that throughout the entire skin area. Now, using some Skarsnik Green, we're going to repeat the process on an increasingly smaller surface area. So mainly at the tops where the main light source is coming from. And we're going to avoid putting too much of this paint in areas that are covered in shadow, such as recesses or areas that would be blocked by light due to things above it casting a shadow on it. Finally, using an airbrush and some Moot Green, we're just going to dry brush the high points of the skin tone that we painted up earlier to help blend in the colors a little bit, but also give us an extreme highlight that's very natural. As you see, I'm using kind of a circular motion here and just trying to tickle the high edges of the skin. And with that done, and even partially here, you can see the big difference in definition of all the muscles. So I went and repeated this process entirely on my first test piece, and this is the result. This is the mini we're going to be using going forward in this video. I think the skin is exceptionally well done here. I'm very pleased with it. Again, it's the exact same process I just outlined, but across the entire skin of the miniature. Next step was to paint the leather areas. I did this using some Rhinox hide, and I picked out all the areas I wanted to be a dark brown, namely the shin pads, I guess you'd call it a harness, the back harness, and the straps that connect the harness to the back. Finally, using some Mornfang Brown, I would just tickle the brown bits with a dry brush. You can see I've already kind of done most of the mini off screen. I meant to record that. I wasn't recording at the time. So this is just, use a small dry brush and pick out the various edges and flat surfaces you want to have a different tone. This will create a worn and used kind of feel to the leather bits. Now with that done, I'd use some lighter leather colors, such as the leather brown from Fnatic lineup, and paint the shin pads and the little bracelet on the back foot there, and give everything an Argrax Earthshade wash to give it some depth in the recesses. Next up, using some Rakarth flesh, I would pick out the crocodile-like belly plates, as well as the toe claws and the feet nails. What the fuck did I just say? The claws and I guess the fingernails. The front feet have hands. I don't know whatever. They're nails. You just paint the nails and the chest piece. This Rakarth flesh. Two coats will probably be required to get a nice full coverage across the whole mini there. We're also going to dry brush some of this on the lower jaw. If you prefer your Kroot jaws to match the same skin tone, you don't have to do this. I like my bottom jaws having kind of a bony texture to them. With that done, we're going to use some Screaming Skull and layer up on the various nails, as you can see I'm doing here, as well as the Croc Plates all across the chest here. So go through and layer up. Make sure to keep some of the Rakarth flesh in the recesses where you want it dark, because the very next step after dry brushing the jaw with some of the same Screaming Skull is to take some Argrax Earthshade, and we're going to recess shade the entire miniature here. So you can see I've painted the fingernails, I've painted the claws, and I left the quills for later. The jaw has received the dry brush and overbrushing to create a nice kind of distinct texture to the jaw from the rest of the face. And now we'll take the Argrax Earthshade and highlight the recesses. Well, not highlight, we're going to shade the recesses with this tone. Don't worry about going over. If you make any mistakes, you can just layer up with some Screaming Skull or Rakarth flesh, depending on where the mistake was made. Both if you have to. Next up, we're going to take some plate mail metal from the Fnatic lineup and pick out all the metal across the miniature. This includes the, the knuckles, or I guess the metal bits of the shin guards here. The knuckle dusters. At least I'm treating these like knuckle dusters. And then the various buckles and belts around the leather harness here will also get this treatment. As with all my metallics, I'll give this all a Nuln Oil wash once it's dry. And there you can see the final result. To start the quills, we're going to give everything a nice base coat of corn red, both the quills on his head, as well as the quills along the body on the arms and the legs and the tail. For the following few steps, do all of these layerings on all of these different quills to get the result you see posted. To start, we're going to use some Mephiston red. I'm dry brushing it on the quills and picking it out on the arms and legs and tail quills, but for the head quills I'm going to use a dry brush. Once that's done, we use some Wild Rider red on a smaller area of the miniature, the red area, specifically. We repeat the process with some Troll Slayer orange across an even smaller section. before finalizing that with some flash gets yellow as an extreme highlight. We'd repeat that process again, like I said, across all the quills. You can see here, I'm just picking off progressively smaller areas of the quill. And you can also give this little extreme highlight via brush to the head quills as well if you want it to be a little bit more extreme at the tips. That's completely up to you. Real quick off screen, I used some ultra matte varnish across the entire miniature. After I picked out the eyes were simply using some white scar to pick out the eyeballs themselves, and then I put some Imperial Fist yellow contrast in the eye hole and let it dry. That's basically it. If you've seen my Votan videos, you've seen how I paint the lanterns. That's exactly how I paint eyes of this size for Kroot. So real quick, we have to finish the shoulder pad. I gave it a black base coat before dry brushing it with some Thunderhawk blue to give it some highlights before giving it a Mephiston red strip across the entire center of it. While I waited for the first coat to dry, I picked out the various metallic bits on this shoulder pad using some greedy gold, and then returned to give the red strip another coat here to make it a nice clean line across the shoulder pad. Finally, using some white scar, I would use it to draw some lines and just add a little bit of extra visual interest to the shoulder pad here. Because this is all, tribal paintings on a wild beast, it doesn't have to be too precise. It can look like mistakes were made, and it can look very natural as a result. So that's what I did here. And then finally, I quickly painted up its rider, as you can see in various other videos I have on the channel, and finished the miniature here. This was quite a fun miniature to build. I really enjoyed this kit. I'm excited to get the other two complete and have these out on the table. But before we go and get a final review, please remember to like and subscribe. I'll be back hopefully every week, if not every 2 weeks, with a new video. The next up, we're going to do some Space Marines again.